I say what? Ho, this is Brian. Call me T for One Gardner, coming to you from Ramble On Tower's Dungeon Studio in scenic Hespeler, Ontario. You are listening to Ramble On Radio, episode number 52. Ramble On Radio is the only dedicated Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news and any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes, and if you go to iTunes, please leave a little review. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. We just need to know. They need to know that people are listening. You can listen on Spreaker, and if you go to Spreaker, if you're on Spreaker, follow. I am Brian. Damn it is my name, or Ramble On Radio. Follow me or follow it, whichever it is you're supposed to do. And check out I Am Brian Damn It on YouTube, and that's where all the places where this episode can be heard. Follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google+, and at Ramble On Blog on Twitter. And yes, it's T for one day. You think to yourself, why does that guy never have any interviews? Oh, he talks and talks and talks and talks. And trust me, I listen to a KISS podcast with two guys now. And those of you who listen to it know who I'm talking about now. And it goes on for like an hour and change. And I never hear the end of it because, sometimes an hour, 40 minutes. I can't sit and listen to three guys talking for an hour, 40 minutes. It's just too long. So I try to keep this tight, and I get that I'm one voice. And one voice for 45. One of the reasons I went to shorter but more instead of kind of, this time between these podcasts a while back was getting stretched out. But they were going on for an hour, 10 minutes in some cases. And that's too long to listen to one guy in monologue mode, I think. Unless that guy is exceptional. There are people, but I don't pretend that I'm one of them. So one of the things I'd like to do more often is get guests, get interviews. And by more often, I mean once or twice in a while. I think in the 52 episodes, I think I've had 3 or 4 guests. Now, I've been working the email like crazy the last while, trying to get people. And here's how it goes. I talked to Dave Lewis last week. Right after I recorded last week, I contacted Dave Lewis. Love to have you on for next week. What do you think? He was in. Try Monday or Tuesday. Now, Dave Lewis lives in England. I live in Toronto, where, by the way, it's still freaking cold. It's okay. It's wet where he is. It's a trade-off. It's been a wet winter in England. For those who don't know, by the way, Dave Lewis runs Type It Loose, the website, publishes the magazine, and has a number of books, and we're going to talk about one of those today, actually. So Dave gets back, Monday or Tuesday I could probably do it. So I get back to him, okay, here's my schedule. Now, my schedule, I work shifts. So, which is to say, I'm currently on afternoon shift, which means I'm getting up at 9 in the morning, I'm leaving for work at 2. You got to give us half an hour. Now, I could get up half an hour or an hour earlier. I could get up at 8 and do an interview if it came to that, right? But I'm not inclined to want to get up at 5 or 6, to make it happen. Seeing as I'm not getting bed till 1. But again, I could do that if it really, really came to it. I could do that, but it's not my preference at all. Way down the list of preferences. So Monday or Tuesday, so I gave him my times, basically, and it was a 4-hour window each day. And then he contacts me back, actually Monday and Tuesdays turned out to be busy, how about Wednesday? I said, okay. Again, here's kind of the scheduling. So it turns out Wednesday's not going to work. This is Wednesday. So now he says, how about like next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, his time? You see, now I work shifts. So now all the times I gave him are no longer good. So he's thinking, we can roll at, okay, 3 o'clock is good for me. Next Tuesday, I'll put that block of time aside, and I'm at work at that point in time. Now it's got to shift to the evening. So just scheduling one guy, and we are time shifting because he's in England, I'm here, I get it. But even scheduling one interview, one guy, it's taken a week of emails back and forth. And look, if you're not busy, I'm probably not interested in you, right? That's the reason I want you on the show is because you're somebody who's got a schedule because you're busy because you're doing something interesting, right? And I'm busy, so and I used to say, I've often said, well, the first thing you get if you won the lottery, and I told my wife I'd hire an editor for the blog because I'm always 2 days later finding some stupid mistake in my writing. I think now I would also hire a producer for the public podcast. Somebody who can chase interviews down for me and schedule things. Because so that's why this stuff doesn't, amongst other things, that's why it doesn't happen. And then, of course, that's somebody who wants to be on the show, who's responded positively being on the show. Now talk about somebody who's not really responding, who's, and even if I do get a response from somebody like California Breed, they say, okay, so-and-so can do something. Is it going to fall within a window that I can work with? Or is my time going to fall within a window they can work with? It gets really hard. So I apologize there's not guests. I would love to have guests on the show. I would love every other show, more or less, to be guests. It's it makes it easy figuring out what I'm going to do. Okay, so-and-so's on, so that's what we're going to talk about. But it is what it is, and that's why. That gives you a glimpse into why, by the way. So here I am. I sit in my Wichita State basketball shirt. It was between this and a Toronto Maple Leaf shirt today, and I couldn't pick somebody who's won a game recently, I guess, is what it boils down to. Sorry, Wichita State fans. But hey, if you live in Kansas, send me a Kansas State. I'll wear it. The good news is baseball season starts next week, so the Blue Jays will still be in the mix of things for another week and a half, 2 weeks. So anyway, I was going to have Dave on today. A couple of things first. If you go to rambleonradio.com, I got a couple of stories up. The first one is, this one was interesting. I stumbled across this, and I haven't seen anybody else posting anything on it, and I stumbled across it. And I think this is really kind of interesting. This is about a year ago, Patterson Hood, who is the singer-leader of the Drive-By Truckers, was doing some solo acoustic shows, and he was running a song called If I Was Jimmy Page. And just an acoustic bit, and it was kind of fun, and there's a YouTube clip there, and I thought I was actually going to play it. I thought I had saved it and played it somewhere in the show, but I didn't have the clip still on my computer, so I didn't play it. And I won't play the recorded version because it's copyrighted music. So Patterson Hood was doing this song, and then the Drive-By Truckers announced just this week or last week that they're going to have an EP available on Record Store Day, a vinyl 10-inch EP called Dragon Pants. And the song, If I Was Jimmy Page, has been changed, title-wise, to Dragon Pants. Been recorded by Drive-By Truckers. And I do have a link to it on my... it's actually a SoundCloud or something link, one of those type of sites. And I hope it's legit. I kind of, after it's been up a day, I've kind of thought, geez, what if that's some fan... I was on Groove Shark is what it is. What if that's some fanboy who's put it up there illegally? And I'm like, because I don't like linking to illegal stuff. So, hey, Patterson Hood, if you're listening and it's not that Groove Shark is not actually official Drive-By Truckers, let me know. If I don't hear from you, Patterson, I'll assume it's legal. How's that sound? I got it on my phone, so I'm gonna play a clip of it for you. This is Dragon Pants. You're getting the lick and not the If I Was Jimmy Page stuff. Of course, my favorite is If I Was Jimmy Page, I'd wear the Dragon Pants all the time. So that's we have some other Record Store Day stuff. The complete list became available last week. There was talk about Yeah, 21st. So I haven't talked about this. There was, and I think I posted. There was one called "The Yardbirds Songs I Heard," and they were only going to do a few copies of it, like 200 or something, some ridiculously low number. And it was a really interesting one. Included inside of it a one-sided 45 single of White Summer. And it had a Dazed and Confused from 68 BBC, Mr. You're a Better Man Now from Stockholm. And it had a live version of Happenings 10 Years Time Ago featuring Page and Beck. And that sounded really... And then they were only going to do 200. And you gotta be kidding me. But they're actually not releasing it in America. It looks like it's still getting the 200 release, but it's only in Britain. Their final album with Jimmy Page... Little Games is being released on vinyl. Now, it's been re-released on vinyl a couple of times. This is nothing spectacularly special. But it will be, what are they calling it? A splatter, colored splatter. So it's kind of got, it's all psychedelic looking, basically. Splatter color vinyl, that's newish. And of course, Page and the Black Crows live at the Greek. 3 LP set, red, and the LPs are red, clear, and blue vinyl, so one of each. 2,000 copies of that, and that's coming out on Record Store Day as well. And then there's now there's this, and kind of stumbled across this one, the Dragon Pants. So if you see it, grab it. I think that's kind of a neat little thing, and it's got. I have listened to the whole thing, and it's got. It's not bad at all. There's actually a really cool song, the one after Dragon Pants, called Grandpa Rock City, which is basically about a retirement, an old rock star in the retirement home. It's amusing. How's that? I wouldn't say it's great, but it's amusing. And then there's Sweet Tea, California Bread Sweet Tea. The video was released. It's their first single. So if you haven't heard California Bread, it goes with tea. If you haven't heard California Breed, the video, it's at rambleonradio.com. The video's there. Go on over. And apparently, and then there was Jimmy Page's daughter did a photographic exhibition. And it started on Monday, and Jimmy showed up. There's a picture of Jimmy there, signed, and he showed up. And there's also... and I've kind of been missing this story as it runs, a charity auction going on involved around it, I believe. And I know John Paul Jones has signed a T-shirt to go with it. But anyway, she's a photographer. If you didn't know, Scarlett Page is a photographer. She worked with Russ Halpern for a while, and then went off on her own, and she does a variety of stuff. She didn't photograph Jimmy until about 10 years in, which makes some sense. Establish yourself without that, and then go, you've earned the Jimmy Page photograph. Legit, right? So, and there's pictures, lots of people linking to pictures of Jimmy and Scarlett at the exhibition. Jimmy was there. Some guy from Stone Temple Pilots. I don't know who he is. But yeah, there's other people there of celebrity note. So that was going on. That's going on now in London. And one of the things I was going to ask Dave is if he made it down. I wonder if maybe that's Monday, Tuesday. He got busy. If that's part of what's going on. Anyway, so that's kind of the small stories of the week. Conceivably, next week there'll be big stories. We'll talk about them, but who knows? That's what's going on out there now. So, the very first episode of Ramble On Radio. At the time, I think I called Ramble On Podcast. It didn't become Ramble On Radio for about 10 episodes. I talked about Dave Lewis's two concert books. Then As It Was, Led Zeppelin at Knebworth, 1979. And Feather in the Wind, Led Zeppelin Over Europe, 1980. And the thing is, I was really reviewing the Over Europe 1980 at the time, but I kind of mentioned it goes hand in hand with the 70s, so I talked about both of them together, because they really cover together, they cover that period very nicely, in some detail between the end of the 77 tour and the beginning of and the end of Led Zeppelin, the death and announcement of the death of John Bonham and the announcements of the dissolution of the band. So I talked about them kind of together, but it was really a review of the Feather in the Wind, which was fairly new at the time. So I'm going backwards. One of the reasons I had to have Dave on is he is re-released, then as it was, Led Zeppelin At Knebworth, 1979, 30 years gone. He's redone the cover. He's added about 40% more content, quite a bit actually. And so I was going to talk to him about that. Now, I don't have the new version. I decided that it becomes one of those things when something like this comes up. Oh, do I want the new version, or do I, am I happy with? I got the old version. Am I really going to get that much more to rebuy the book, etc., etc. I decided not. But you can if you've already got it. But anyway, I'm not going to review it so much. Let me tell you this: it's an excellent book. It's a really easygoing, good read. Much as I talk about having different voices here, Dave hands the book over to other people at different times, and has people doing their memories of Knebworth, just fans who went to the shows and stuff, including his. But it's kind of their Knebworth stories, and then he's also got some of the interviews that were done around that time to give you a sense of place and time, really. And then a thorough history leading up to Knebworth. A very thorough. The first half is this very thorough history of Led Zeppelin, 1978, 79, basically. And into 1980. He talks about the interviews they did. He talks about the reviews of the concert, the reviews of the in-through-outdoor album, the in through the outdoor recording sessions and writing sessions, the various little gigs. They showed out the Dave Edmunds shows that Robert Plant played at, or that sort of thing. There was a lot of that stuff going on, and he covers it all with exceptional detail. So if you're interested in that time frame, this is a great book, and it is a really good history. And Dave was there, right? It's not a point. He did two things. He was there quite a bit. He was already writing Type It Loose as a fan magazine at the time, so he was covering it as basically a 22-year-old for his own magazine. So he was there in that sense. He was and he had met the guys in Led Zeppelin by then. He had talked to them a little bit. He was a bit of an insider, so he knew stuff. And for instance, he's got pictures of him talking to Robert Plant outside Knebworth. Robert Plant asks him where the stage is, Now, to be clear, he's just kind of there. But if you or I were there, Robert Plant doesn't stop to chat, right? So he was at the shows. He was at both shows, and he got out to a number of the 1980 tours or 1980 shows in Europe. So, and then he's a phenomenal clip keeper. If Led Zeppelin's mentioned in the magazines, the newspapers, he's kept them. He has, whether he's clipped them out or just has all the magazines there, all the New Music Express and whatnot. He's a phenomenal, seems to have a phenomenal collection of clippings. So, and this is all in there, and all the, the history through those is there. So he's got the reviews, and he's got. So it is an excellent history, I guess is what I'm saying, right? It's not just as told by somebody who was there, but it's somebody who was there and making notes and saving other people's notes. But there's a couple of things that come up that I wanted to hit on specifically in this book. Let me just say, if you don't have it and you're looking for a good Led Zeppelin book, go to tblweb.com, Google Type It Loose. It's the first thing that comes up. And yeah, by all means, buy this. And if you still got the 30 Years Gone, or the Feather in the Wind, Led Zeppelin Over Europe, 1980, get that as well. Get the two together. They go together really well. And they really are an exceptional history of the time. Okay. in the reviews at the time, and I've had this conversation with Dave Lewis before, and I've talked about it here a bit. He keeps bringing up the reviews of the show, and do you know, in every review, and there's a lot of talk about how the punks were taking over, and Led Zeppelin were outsiders, and the question becomes, and this is more in the over 80, I think he brings this up more, where would Led Zeppelin's role be in the punk world, the post-punk world, or the punk world? And the answer is, outside of England, Europe, it would be fine. Look, I was 16 years old in 1979. The punks were such a fringe element in North America as to be virtually unthought of. Look at the record. The Sex Pistols came to America and they played bars. They didn't play 2,000 seat places even. They played bars. They were just another crappy bar band. Crappier than most, in my opinion. But that's what they were. Even nothing rock bands with a record played bigger places than the Sex Pistols played when they came to America. There was no market for those guys. There was a market for rock and roll. And you look at, in the late 80s, the hair metal came in. It kind of shows that, because it disappeared. The rock and roll did dip a bit. And there was people like Journey and stuff, but it became Journey and stuffish. But bands like Styx and Journey and in the early 80s, and a guy called Billy Squire, if you don't know him, was putting out some pretty good rock music, and those guys were doing well. In the mid 80s, you got into the Madonna stuff, and the rock bands disappeared. Then they came back loud and hard as the hair metal bands. How Led Zeppelin would have fared in the hair metal band era, I think, is a more interesting question. I think they would have had a really hard time fitting in. And you'll note that's kind of the era when the Stones gave it a rest. And, Elton John kind of let things lie. He had a couple of good albums in that era, but he really didn't do much. And, and like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and stuff like that was going on instead. The dance music, and then the hair metal came in. And the older rock bands, I really seem to struggle in that era more than they did at any other. You look at what Heart did in that era, and they talk now about, well, we were a bit lost, because it's your kind of music, but it's not, right? It's not your comfort zone, but it's, people would have expected them to get into that comfort zone. And you see, actually, with Robert Plant's solo career, towards the late 80s, he starts struggling a bit to find a sound that's working. So I don't think, in America, the idea of the punks having any effect on Led Zeppelin is laughable. But throughout the reviews, every single review of In Through the Outdoor Knebworth refers to them as dinosaurs. Every single one uses the word, not just kind of gets around there. Every single one uses that word. Dinosaurs. They're dinosaurs. They're dinosaurs. Because apparently it was funny and original to call these guys dinosaurs. The only thing I could say about that is, if that's your writing, if that's what you got to give as a writer, get a real job. That's not funny. And after the first person, it's not even close to original. It's awful writing, to be honest. But it's there. It's constantly these dinosaurs. And Robert Plant talks about it on stage, but the reviews, and the second week especially about the reviews, and I'm kind of looking for one quickly as I'm doing this. But I'm not really finding one. But they constantly compare them to these moron punks. So, let's face it, punk was, in 1979, was at its peak and would be virtually gone in 2 years, and didn't exist 2 years earlier. Now, I know, by the way, I'm saying, there's punks, and there was no market in North America. I know there were pockets of North America. New York City had a punk movement, but it wasn't people, start with, running around calling other, the Ramones never talked about how anybody else was garbage or they just did their thing. They put their head down, rock and roll, did their thing. And it was a very straightforward, fast, up-tempo, straightforward rock and roll is what it was. The British punks were different. They were kind of being outlandish, and they were the ones doing the safety pin through the cheek and spitting on people and talking about what dinosaurs, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd were talking about how it makes you puke. And I mean, it's just not. It didn't happen over here at all. And even if you met, like I was at a party one time and there was this punk chick and I got talking to her. Her dad played in the NHL, actually, by the way. Just a real aside there. Did I ever lose my train of thought? So I'm talking to her and she's like, yeah, I don't mind this band, I don't mind that band, but I really prefer the punk stuff, and she's talking about these punk bands, and I don't want to sound like Casanova here. We hit it off a bit. And no, I never went out with her, I didn't take her off to bed. So when I say we hit it off a bit, we spent an hour and a half having a friendly conversation, a couple of drinks. And I'm this Led Zeppelin geek, and she's this punk chick, and there was common ground to be found. I guess is what I was, that wouldn't happen in Britain, right? Because she would have been, oh, Led Zeppelin sucks. And I'd be going, oh, so do the Sex Pistols. And it's over. The conversation just ended, right? We talked about music. She liked this stuff and that stuff. She had a wide taste, but her preference was, and stylistically, her preference was the British punk. She didn't have to put something else down to enjoy what she was doing. And that was, it just, and she was, I'm talking about, she had the pins in her cheek, and she had the spiked hair, and the whole kind of thing. She was a full-on punk chick, as close as I ever got to a British punker, dyed hair with a mohawk sort of thing. And it was none of that kind of attitude that was happening in Britain. So there was it would have had zero effect, and this nonsense about dinosaurs was just silliness. Silly. Okay, and then the other thing was, Dave talks about In Through the Outdoor. The release of In Through the Outdoor, and he kind of does his own little review of it. Here we go. Found that easy enough. Talks about the making of it. He goes on great detail about the making of it, about the album cover, about where the ideas for the 6 different covers came from, and it was Peter Grant who insisted on the brown paper bag going out front, so people didn't know what cover they were getting, and it was Jimmy Page who, because the idea was, the idea is brought from the Hypnosis team, and Aubrey Powell was a new. Let me find it. It was basically like a new coat of paint, right? These guys are going to be a new lick of paint. The new lick of paint. And there's, in the picture, there's like this stroke through it. It's a black and white picture. Then it's got like a paint stroke of color. And that's designed, that's the new lick of paint. They're putting a new coat of paint on the old band, is what they were kind of saying. And you can see how they're mentally affected by this attitude of them being dinosaurs in that. They didn't need a new lick of paint. But they felt that was coming. So with that idea of adding the color, Jimmy Page said, well, we should make the cover inside one of those ones where you can add water and color it. Like the kids' books. And then it was Peter Grant says, well, if it's going to be 6 different covers, we've got to cover it with a paper bag. So he goes into great detail about where all this stuff comes from. But then he gets talking about the record, the album. And this is, I almost completely disagree with Dave on In Through the Outdoor, on everything he says. And I maybe I shouldn't say that. There are a couple of places where I'll agree with him. I'll agree with him on In the Evening. Where he says, satisfying. It's a satisfying flexing of muscles. I always thought In the Evening's a bit of a mess. And he kind of hints at that without saying it. Plant's arrogant, strutting vocal is undercut by majestic, cascading riff. And it is majestic and it's big sounding. There's something messy about it, though. But it works. And I guess that's the point. And I would agree with him. That's a good opening song. That's a song that works well as an opener. Then he goes, less vital is Southbound Soiree, a Joan and Plant's creation full of rollicking piano. This is a track that conjures up Louisiana, New Orleans, barroom felt on the sleeve. Plant's vocals are somewhat strained, and overall, the only redeeming feature, quote unquote, the only redeeming feature of a rather lackluster outing is a measured Page solo and the doo-wop fade out. I completely disagree. I love that song. That's a great up-tempo, toe-tapping, head-bobbing song. That's a fun song, and it works on every level. I completely disagree with that. That it's a lackluster outing. That's a great little bop. That's right up there with Dancing Days and The Ocean, to be honest, I think. Good, fun song. And then Fool in the Rain, he agrees, something of a departure. He talks about the influence, which I never would have known of, the win of the 1978 World Cup. The house is falling apart. Don't mind it. It's the temperature got above minus 15 degrees, and the warming of the house expanded all the joints in the house. I think that's what just happened. Because, it is only the last week of March, so minus 11, my computer says it's the last week of March. Stop this. And I actually think tomorrow is supposed to be over freezing. It's supposed to get warm for the weekend for us. And I bet you wine, but out east here in Canada, out in the eastern parts, they're looking at something like 50 centimeters of snow tomorrow. For those of you who live in non-metric world, that would be approximately 18 inches. 18 to 20 inches. So there you go. And the easy way to make that measure, a meter is 100 centimeters, and it's within an inch or so of being a yard. So 100 centimeters is a yard. So 50 is half a yard, 18, Okay, so he talks about the samba rhythms and the influence from the World Cup being in Argentina in 1978, which I never knew. I know, that's kind of a European thing probably, that those kind of beats were actually in at that time. And he talks about, he does talk about how it works. It's one of them. Funny, he talks about Plant's affinity for the song, which I didn't know Plant had an affinity for. I know he played it once with Pearl Jam, but I figured, to be honest, Pearl Jam maybe came and said, how about this one? Because I think that time with Pearl Jam in Chicago in 2005 is the only time he's ever actually played it. And then the Hot Dog, he says, it comes across as a leading exercise that has not stood the test of time too well. Look, Hot Dog's a bit of fun. It's and it's not, my wife just said, I puttered around the house singing it the other day, and I looked up and says, do I have this right? You're singing Led Zeppelin? And she goes, that and Stairway to Heaven are the only Led Zeppelin songs I can really take. So Hot Dogs, it's a song that just your regular listener can actually get into a bit. It's a fun song. It's just, and it's never meant. It's not like it's a song. I mean, it's not Billy Don't Be a Hero that takes itself. It's a fun little song that takes itself too seriously. It's a fun song that at no point in time does it take itself seriously. To call it leading is a bit. I think that's unfair. And then he gets into Carousel Amber, and I know my opinion on Carousel Amber is probably not popular opinion amongst Led Zeppelin crowds. I think it's just an awful mess. It's almost unlistenable at times, I think. It's, how long is it? Is it 11 minutes or something long? It's outrageously long. And there's nothing happening. It's just kind of goes on and on. And all the kind of bad things people would say about progressive music. It's boring and slow and it doesn't go anywhere. Carousel Amber has so much of those traits. And I get the production is not good on it, and the vocals are way down in the mix. And I think really what Dave says is there's an unfinished business about Carousel Amber. It was so nearly a great epic that there's one track worthy of being a contemporary remix by Page. This is it. They were apparently planning on running it in the American tour in 1980. They were working up, and they did work up a mix of a mix, a version of it for Knebworth, but they never played it. And maybe live, maybe it's one of those ones that live takes on a different aura about it. That I think, for instance, the song remains the same. Misses its mark as on the album, on the Houses of the Holy album, but live, Jesus, it's such a good song, and I think it is just a production thing. It's something's not quite clicking with it on Houses of the Holy that clicks live. So maybe Carousel Amber is one of those. Maybe. I just think it's a bloody mess, and you know, if it were me, I'd take that out and put in Wearin' and Tearin' and Darlene. Go with those two, and you have a much better side too. I think, but Dave disagrees. All My Love. He talks about it being one of them. And he does talk about Jimmy not liking it very much. But Page has, you know, said through the years that both John Bonham and I felt Into the Outdoor was a little soft. Really wasn't keen on All My Love. I could imagine people doing the wave and all that, and that's just not us. I disagree with that to a degree. I think, see where I'm talking about with the hair metal thing, though? Whereas they would have had an awful, uncomfortable time fitting into the hair metal day when people were doing the wave and the lighters, and that was all part of it, right? Would have been very weird for them, I think. Then he talks, he talks about it being one of their better, one of Plant's better performances, and it being a very nice song, and it is a very lovely song. Let's face it. But Dave talks about he talks about being one of Page's finer moments, which is true. The guitar work on that is so interesting. It's so intricately in there. He's doing some really neat little things. And I told Paul Hammond, get the lead out. They played it one of the times I was there, and I was standing right in front of Paul. And he says, "What do you think of All My Love?" I says, "I missed it. I was so busy watching you diddly-do on the guitar. It was so cool." Though, you know, and he's using a B bender there. He's using his Brown Telecaster with a B bender there. And just pulling those notes around. And it's such a cool little guitar part. And he does talk about there's a version of it that circulates in bootleg that's not, it doesn't have the fade out, and Page goes into a little guitar bit there that's exceptional. And I've heard about this for years. I don't think I've ever actually heard it, and if I have, I don't recall it. And it's one of those things I got to look up and put the headphones on and really listen through to. But I think it's the same mix. It just doesn't have the ending. It doesn't fade out. So Plant keeps doing the, All of My Love, and I Get So Lonely, that sort of stuff. He keeps doing that while Page is doodle-doo-doodle-doo. And apparently it's really exceptional. And the final track of the album, as he says, I'm Gonna Crawl, is a relaxed and confident slow blues. Here's another. This is one he seems to like. He seems to think there's a lot there, and I've never been able to get too into I'm Gonna Crawl. Of all of their slow blues, T for One, Since I've Been Loving You, this is by far the lowest end one. This one doesn't do it for me. It's like Carousel Amber. I just wonder, and maybe if the sessions weren't so rushed, they turn this into something else, and it's there. This is one I feel is incomplete more than anything. Much more than Carousel Amber. I think this one is close to being one of those great blues songs, but never quite crosses over into it. And you wonder if they gave them a little more time to play with it. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But anyway, he really quite likes the song, and I really quite don't. I think, to me, the weak points in Through the Outdoor which is I love the album, by the way. It's one of my favorite albums, is I'm Gonna Crawl and Curse Alhambra. Side one, I listen to side one all day, every day. It's a great, to me. And you got to understand, I was 16 when it came out, right? It was my Led Zeppelin album. I've been talking on Twitter with Daryl recently, and he's discovered it. And I can't believe how much I like this album. It really is. Go back and listen to it. It's a great album. Put on side one, put it on loud. And listen, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, what am I missing in Curse Alhambra and I'm Gonna Grow? Maybe I'm just missing it, you know? Maybe that's, I don't know. Anyway, he also talks about there were 3 other songs done that session: Wear and Tear and Darlene and Ozone Baby, all 3 of which made it to Coda. Wear and Tear and Darlene were going to be released for the Knebworth concert as a 45, exclusively for the Knebworth concert as a 45. And that never got done. And I've been talking about this for a while now, but I think that would be the perfect record store day piece for Led Zeppelin, especially when, like, if this time next year they're releasing the last 3 albums, the remasters, that would be a phenomenal record to go along with Into the Outdoor. Would be the Wearing and Tearing and Darlene single, you know, with the front cover from the Knebworth show, that sort of stuff. Would be a phenomenal piece. I'd love to see them do that. But there you go. But those are the songs that were done for it. And yeah, to me, take out Curse Alhambra, put Wear and Tear and Darlene and Ozone Baby in, and you got a real rockin' record. But I understand they thought they had something with Curse Alhambra. They thought something was working there. And and Dave may be right that it just misses expectations. It's not a bad song. It's a song that misses its mark. I don't know. Anyway, that's it. I try to keep this to about half an hour for the same thing I was talking about before. The voice just goes on and on and on. And here it is. And I really thought this was going to be a tight one because I was planning an interview. The interview didn't happen. But it wasn't a tight one. It ran 42 minutes. So it's time to go. So listen, thank you for listening. Thank you for checking in wherever you did. This is Ramble On Radio, episode 52. Don't forget to check rambleonradio.com. Listen to Dragon Pants. Listen to Sweet Tea from California Breed. And in notes on this week's podcast, any Led Zeppelin news reviews, any links I might have mentioned, which is just the ones I just mentioned. Follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google+, and at Ramble On Blog on Twitter. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes. Don't forget to leave a review. Listen on Spreaker. Be sure to follow me on Spreaker. And that's Spreaker, SPREAKER.com. So be sure to follow me on Spreaker. And check out I Am Brian Dammit on YouTube. Thank you for listening to Ramble On Radio, episode number 52. And I will see you. I will talk to you, hopefully with Dave Lewis on the other end of the phone, this time next week. Bye.
Switch off the internet.